Hello, everybody. You guys having a good day at the Coliseum? All right. Well, we've got a great day ahead for you, and now I want to bring out our panelists for our next panel on Gaming Evolve. Please welcome Katie Stone Perez from Xbox, Sarah Schachner, the composer who's worked on games like Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed, and Jennie Kong, who is at That Game Company, working as a writer on a project we can't talk about. All right. Well, this is a really important panel, I think, to have at E3. Because the video game industry is something I've been in since I was a little kid, playing games, and this is my 23rd E3. And one of the great things that I've seen over the years is that the gaming industry has really started to evolve. 20 years ago, we were looking at a lot of very similar looking games, and now there's so many independent games, there's so many great games you walk around E3 made by a really diverse group of creators. So this panel is really about looking at how the industry has evolved and where it needs to go in the future to make the gaming industry grow, because we all love games and we want more people to play games. And when I was growing up, it was always frustrating because not everyone was playing games, and I think we all know the immersive power of games, and we want more people to experience them. So these three folks have really interesting perspectives and I think unique points of view on the industry and what it's going to take to encourage a more diverse group of people to make games, which hopefully leads to even more diverse games that we get to play. So before we start, wanted to have them all tell you a little bit about their background, starting with you, Katie.
Yeah, so I actually joined the game industry 16 years ago at Xbox. I grew up playing games, so a lot of my childhood memories are actually playing games with my little brother and playing games with all my neighbors and friends during sleepovers. So I've been a gamer my entire life. And funny enough, my background is actually in psychology, and I spent a lot of time focusing on child psychology. And I just happened to run into a recruiter for Microsoft right before Xbox was launching. And they actually talked to me about coming over and working at Xbox. And initially I was like, oh gosh, what when I get there, if everyone's super hardcore and I play these really different types of games, I'm not a first-person shooter fan, is that really going to be accepted there? And one of the things I really found as I landed in the industry, and especially at Xbox, was although I had a very different perspective and voice, that voice was really valued and listened to. And I felt like I could bring a lot of different questions to the table and have us look at our content really differently. So over the last 16 years, while I've worked at, helping create Xbox Live Arcade and helping invent Kinect and HoloLens and ID at Xbox, I really feel like I've been able to help bring that additional perspective to the table and been lucky enough to be in a company that really wanted to listen.
Absolutely, and ID at Xbox is an incredible slate of creators making games. We'll talk more about that. Sarah, you have worked on some incredible games the past couple of years. I think a lot of folks want to know your history and how you got into this amazing position of working on these incredible games.
Yeah, I grew up playing games as well, but more of the first-person shooters. And but even though I played them, it didn't occur to me that writing music for games was something I could do. I know you could write music for films and TV, and I was kind of on that path. But then when I got to LA, I had the chance to do some additional music for a composer that was doing video games, and I just fell in love with it right away, and I pursued it from that point on. And now I'm here. I don't know how I got here, but
I'm working on other secret games we can't talk about.
Yes.
All right, we know what you've done. Jennie, we've known each other for a long time, having worked together when you were at PlayStation and other places, but tell us a bit about how you got to this unique position now to be at That Game Company and working as a writer in a studio that, of course, you guys know have made some incredible games over the years.
Yeah, I think, like many of us, I actually was very blessed to be raised in a family full of gamers. I have three brothers. My uncle had bought all the game systems. I was very much exposed to the gaming world when I was growing up. But when I actually came to the point of studying at university, I actually studied writing, directing, media production, because back then there was no game development, course or, degree that I could take. So that was the path that I took. But when I graduated, what I found in London at the time was that there was actually a much more thriving industry in the video game community. So, on the doorstep of, where I took a couple of my internships, the development community was, really growing. The publishing community was really growing, and I ended up landing my feet at Sony PlayStation. I was there for a number of years, working on the publishing side, as well as Worldwide Studios on the development side. And I was very lucky to have worked on a lot of the big titles from Naughty Dog, Guerrilla Games, Polyphony, Team Eco. But I think what was interesting about working with Sony, as we've seen over the years, is that they've been able to take those risks and back independent developers, basically, with their PSN network. So it's been really interesting just to see it from that side. And over the last 5 years, I've been focusing a lot more on creativity and writing again. And so having known Genova and Kelly through Flower and Jennie, they invited me back to the studio to maybe help them kind of carve out what the story world could look like for the next project. So.
Now, I think you all talked about kind of growing up, being interested in the video game industry. When I was growing up, me and my brother were in Canada always playing video games that sort of connect us in a way. But my younger sister, she read books, never played video games, and always kind of never quite understood like the fascination I had with that. And I think back now, like, with the amount of games out there and on phones, other ways, I feel like more and more people are playing games. And I always wonder now, like, hey, would my sister have been playing games back then if there were more games? And that leads into a question I wanted to ask you about the idea of a more diverse slate of games. Do you think it's important as the industry continues to grow and tries to make games for more people, do we need a more diverse set of people creating those games in order to kind of create that diverse content?
I mean, I definitely think, yes. So many of my favorite games have been really unique experiences that have come from amazingly diverse creators. And I think especially as a creative industry, we need to remember the fact of how powerful it is for someone when they feel that a character can represent who they are. There's amazing video out there on YouTube of a little girl with a prosthetic who ends up getting an American Girl doll who has a prosthetic. And she just bursts into tears, and then the first words you hear her say are, "It looks like me." And I think we forget as people, even for me as a woman growing up playing games, and I always had to be a boy character, that, I was always frustrated by that I didn't get to play a female in a lead role, right? And so as we've seen more diversity, that's really empowered me more and brought me and connected me into a lot of content. And so I think as an industry, we have to think about how we can connect people better into our content and be more representative within our content. And I think a great way to do that is to make sure that we're having those voices within our teams and our studios. And I know at Xbox, we're always working and striving to have that increased diversity.
Sarah, what about you? I mean, you're in a field where a lot of male composers out there, and you were playing first-person shooters back in the day, so you were playing the hardcore games.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that there needs to be more diversity and content created to include everybody and not just single out boys or certain types of interests. But I mean, from my perspective, I grew up playing Halo and Call of Duty and all that stuff, and I was a huge tomboy, so it didn't bother me at the time, but now I'm like, okay, there needs to be stuff for girls and stuff for just people that don't have that mainstream interest, for sure.
I think a huge piece of it, too, talking about your sister, right, is that there's so much content out there today, and I think people don't know how to find it, right? And so they see the marketing for these other experiences and
that represents the whole industry.
They don't understand, right? We even as an industry, I think, limit who we talk about even as a gamer, right? And so I think that ties into...
I think it's a great point, because I look at, the Game Awards, we do, like, category games for impact, and there are all these, there are 4 or 5 titles get nominated every year, and people come to the show and tell me, it's like, I'd never heard of these games. I didn't know they existed out there. And that's one thing I think you're right, as the industry, we need to do a better job of sort of evangelizing that content and getting it out in front of more people. Jennie, Genova and I have had a lot of great chats over the years about, his vision, I think, for, games, and actually I've talked to him a lot about, how he wants games that will sort of bring people together and invite someone else to be part of sort of the experience, and even, Journey, great example, right, of sort of, connecting people in a way where you don't even know who you're playing against, right? It could be anyone. Tell me about that sort of philosophy of growing the base of gamers. I think it's something that really drives a lot of, That Game Company and how you approach design for all your titles, and that they're games that gamers really appreciate, but I also think there's an artistry and accessibility that makes them potentially appeal to a wider group of people.
Yeah, I think, if you guys have played, Flower or Flow and a couple of the other games, I think the goal when we started the studio, over 10 years ago now, was to look at games in terms of how can we make gaming more accessible so that it's not just the select few that know how to, grab a controller and play the game. How can we make it more intuitive so that you can get, quick into the gaming experience very quickly? And, just as importantly, it's like, well, can gaming be something more than just a competitive kind of player scenario? So 2 players competing against each other, high score. Could you imagine if Jennie was a race to the mountaintop rather than, the kind of slow progression of players meeting each other as they go along? And I think the one thing that certainly with Jennie that we focused on was how can we look at emotion as part of the video game design now? I think that's a very kind of new thing that we've been seeing in game development recently. How can we actually, make more meaningful experiences, touch people emotionally a lot more? And with Jennie, we focus very much on what the human connection can be between 2 players. And I think that's certainly the philosophy that we try to kind of work around is, how can we create new emotions in video games that you haven't seen in other games before? So if you think about maybe, with film and TV, hey, there's, the action, adventure genre, there's the horror genre, there's, all like sports genre that you're so used to, but what about the other elements of, where is the comedy, where is the drama, where is the indie film, where is the, foreign film, and convert that into games, where are those emotions coming from? So it's something that we're feeling out, and I think some of the other indie creators are certainly, grabbing hold of that opportunity.
Speaking of emotion, Sarah, one of the things I love about video games is the music. There's, such emotional resonance, I feel, to a lot of these scores. And even though they're, big action games like Call of Duty, it's like, there are those magical story moments. I wanted to ask you about, working on games like Call of Duty, Assassins. How do you feel like you can't, I guess more question is, do you feel like your voice can be inserted into those games through the music? And how do you, how did you sort of imbue those games with sort of some emotional resonance through the music that you were writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Call of Duty, the new one in particular, was really special to me because I did get to infuse more of myself than I would have thought for a game like that. They really wanted this game to be more emotional than past entries. When you think about Call of Duty, you're not really thinking about, oh, that like really emotional score. But so it did take place in space, but the musical focus was more on the burdens of leading a war and the losses and the loneliness that you would feel isolated, having to save humanity and small little things like that. Yeah. But so there really was a place to inject more emotion and more of myself into it. And with Assassin's Creed, it's a little different because that's much more based on the geographical location in the region. And with that, I never want to do an exact imitation of the ancient music of the time because I don't really see how that totally serves the game. I think if you can do a hybrid of take what you like from the historical era and then infuse it with your own voice. So I'm always trying to put as much as I can of my own voice into it, and then it creates some new sound that is new to me too. So keeps it fun.
What can the industry be doing to encourage more of that diversity? Katie, you sort of talked a little bit about it, about, maybe we need to do a better job exposing some of these games. We all think, as gamers, we need to share these with people. But are there other things that, the industry should be doing more active? I feel like a lot of creators now have even something like diversity of the characters, like female characters. I find a lot of creators are, I think, sort of thinking more about that and saying, there could be more emotion in this story. That could be more appealing. What are some of the other things you think that, creators and even game publishers should be doing to sort of encourage that?
I think there's a couple different things. I think, if you look at our industry, we started with these coin-op days where we would kill people because we needed you to put another quarter in the game, right? And yet so much of our game experience is still very defeatist towards players, and there's certain people that appeals to, and there's certain that it doesn't, right? I think, a great example is the Journey experience, right? And so I think there's, within a content standpoint and how we engage our players and talk to our players, I think there's so much we can do. I also think, as a platform, there's a lot that we've been doing at Xbox to try and just remove the barriers so that we can create opportunities for these developers to have success. Getting to look and work with one-person studios in small, remote places around the world, and looking at removing the barriers of rating systems and all of the work that they need to do to get onto the platforms, and giving them a path to success and helping their voices shine by shining that spotlight on them. That's one of the proudest things about, the ID at Xbox program that I love, is that, even for our events and things like our PAX events and things like that, we let anybody within the program actually submit their game to be shown at those events. It's not a who happens to be our BFF and live right next door to us. And we've had amazing diversity in our events because of that, and we get to shine that spotlight on those creators. And I think that's really powerful because we need to find those voices and then rise them up.
Over the last few years, there's been really a democratization of dev tools, right? So hopefully, if you're an aspiring game creator, you've grown up with computers, games, everything, you can have access to Unreal or Unity and actually learn how to make games and riff on ideas with your friend. You can just do this from your bedroom. I mean, that is the reality now. I would love to see publishers take maybe more of a risk and bankroll some of these indie projects. I mean, that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, I would also like to see more risk as well with hiring, because I feel very lucky that in the gaming industry I've had a couple instances where an executive has done a blind listen to our demos. And I don't know if I would have gotten hired if they had preconceived notions based on being, I don't know, gender or whatever reason, not the right credits, or but I've seen a change in the game industry versus any other, like film, TV.
So you think it's more progressive than
more
film,
progressive,
TV?
way more progressive, way more open, way more willing to take risks, and that I think that's helped me to get where I am, and I'm really thankful for it, and it makes me happy and proud to be in the gaming industry.
All right, here for that. That's good to hear. So as the industry moves forward, we talked about this sort of proactive approach to thinking of wider diversity. It's not just gender. I think it's many different dimensions of this industry, trying to make even games just more accessible to people to play, right? Disabilities or other things. I think the industry is trying to think progressively about this, and there have been some signs. Like I know here at USC in LA, they often tell me that the undergraduate gaming program, which Jennie, as you said, didn't exist when we went to school. Now I think it's something like close to half the applicants are women, and people from all walks of life are applying with this interest in gaming. So as we think forward about the sort of the education around games, I'd love to get some thoughts from you guys. Even Sarah, a lot of people going to school to sort of learn how to compose, and as you said, in traditional sort of film, TV worlds, those doors were closed. How important is sort of the education piece of this, and what's happening in sort of high school and college programs to open up the possibility of more people entering gaming?
Yeah, I think they absolutely should just be more open with how they teach things. If, like we were talking backstage, if kids are learning coding at an early age, they're going to be 10 steps ahead of anyone else trying to get into the gaming industry. Same goes for music. If getting kids involved with the technology that's so good now, I mean, it's the best time ever to be creating. If they get familiar with the technology and learn how to use Pro Tools as a kid, they can probably figure out their passions
Were you
earlier.
using Pro Tools when you were a kid?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say that's pretty bad.
I used Reason, which I don't use anymore. I use an 8-track tape machine.
Okay.
But yeah, I just think that introducing it as early as possible, and like what you were saying with the games that can teach empathy, and they're not all about shooting and blowing things up. I think because kids learn differently, and a lot of the kids might learn better from a game than from a teacher standing in front of the class.
I think USC is a model to really look to. I unfortunately don't think that we see that same statistic, throughout the world in game programs today. And, I do a lot of work with high school girls and things like that, and we don't see high school girls choosing to take computer science classes. And, I have a lot of girls that talk to me and they say, well, I tried coding once, but I wasn't very good at it. Because I think as society, we also have this perception that we put out there that we're perfect and we just got to these places within our jobs instantly and we never had failures and we never had moments where we woke up absolutely terrified and didn't know how we were going to get through the day. But that's the reality. We all have those moments and we all have those growth and learning pieces, but that's not what comes across. And so I think we need to do a lot better job to make sure that education is open to everyone. And I think in inspiring them, and I think that's where as an industry today, we also have so much opportunity to inspire people and let them feel included in our gameplay. One of the coolest features that has come out recently for my family is actually the Xbox Copilot mode. And if you're not familiar with it, you can actually connect two controllers together so that you can actually help someone who's either has a disability or is not as familiar with gaming or is younger. And like my 5-year-old can now sit there and play games with us in family game night, and she's laughing hysterically and saying, this is awesome. And it's totally changed her connection to gaming because of this feature that lets us kind of have her back when she needs it, but not take the controller from her to say, you're not good enough to do that yet. And so I think there's so much that as an industry, we have to create those moments of success and inspiration, but then we also have to look at how we're going out and convincing people. And then once they get into those programs, how do we help them feel that they have a voice? The majority of women who start in a computer science class, do not complete computer science at the end of that first year of school. And so we need to change those perceptions.
We have a few minutes left. I want to open up to audience questions. If you guys have anything, just raise your hand and we can get some questions in. I think we have a mic going around, maybe right here. I think the microphone's coming. There you go.
Hey, how you doing? I'm actually not really a avid gamer, more of a casual gamer, but more importantly, I am a teacher. I've been trying to, over the past few years, bring game-based learning to my own students. It's been difficult, but what do you guys see in relation to games being introduced more into the education K-12 realm, and how you think that is going to look moving into the future?
Yeah, so question, game-based learning, how do we use games? Going to Minecraft, obviously, a lot going on
Yeah,
there.
Minecraft's Education Edition, and that's not only to teach the coding fundamentals, it's really about helping teachers teach other principles as well. When you think about what video games do, there's this principle in education called scaffolding, where you don't want to give the player the answer, you want to give them enough visibility into what's happening so that they can figure it out for themselves, because it's that self-learning, that moment of, ooh, I figured out how to do it, that's so powerful. And that's that same principle in education. And so video games can do so much to help provide that scaffolding. I also think just in the next generation, there's so much, like coding literacy is going to be required for so many careers out there. If you look at the statistics, we don't have nearly enough kids going into computer science. And so it's not a lot of people are like, ooh, I just did my first string table. But it's a lot more interesting when you're like, ooh, look, I created a character and I learned how to animate it and I just made it jump. That's really rewarding and fulfilling. And so I actually think games can be an incredibly powerful tool from an educational standpoint, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Games
I
everywhere.
think Google had the other day. Google had, every day there's like a game.
Right.
And
Oh,
it was
yeah,
a
the Google
coding-
homepage. Yeah.
It was a coding thing, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And it was really hard, and I was like, I'm bad. I can't do this. I couldn't get through. And I felt stupid.
But you know Pro Tools. And I
The
don't know Pro
Minecraft
Tools.
Hour of Code, if you haven't done it, is, I think, an amazing experience to teach in your kids' classrooms. So.
Cool.
This is a very different take, actually, to your question, but I'm really interested in how VR is going to play in education in terms of learning. I'm seeing videos with classrooms where, there's these, they're putting on the headset, they're transported to Egypt and to learn about the history there, and we never had that growing up. So how can that teach a much more kind of macro level about the world around us and society? I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think VR and mobile has been such a huge opportunity too. I think because most kids now have a phone at some point and are playing something, and it's like, there can be fun games to learn from, but I think is that emotional resonance when you start to have those games when it's like, you're reading your first books, but then to have these games that then become, and grow from there and become interactive and, tell stories, you said, that aren't just about blowing things up. I think there's huge opportunities in mobile too, because games are more accessible than ever before.
I think though, as an industry, we have to be careful then how we approach these fields, right? Like video games, if you think about the early commercials and the early presentation of video games, it was families playing together, right? And then it wasn't until the video game crashed and you have video games come back onto the toy aisle, which at that point was gendered. So you saw them choose the boy aisle, and then you saw all of the heavy boy-focused marketing campaigns that video games started to heavily sway towards that male experience. So I think as an industry, we're at this critical point with VR and AR, where we have to really be conscious about the UI experiences and our treatments and the content we present, and make sure that more voices feel included than how we did that early within our own industry.
Great point. One more question. Let's go to you right there.
Hey there. I actually have a question for all three of y'all. For what goes in the planning process for each of your field? For like example, Sarah, do they give you a video that you look at prior to constructing or writing for a script? And for Jen, do they give you maybe like a storyboard, an overview, kind of detail analysis of like what you need to go on to create or write for the game?
Yeah, I've gotten storyboards, and usually just get like 100 videos that are sample gameplay for each kind of general situation. You never know what the player's going to do, but you know what situation they're going to be in. So I just take that, and that's enough inspiration to do the music for each part of the game.
Cool.
I think from my side, we focus on emotion and the player experience as being number one. So everything like design, story, art, and music that we're known for at That Game Company has to serve what that emotional experience for the player is. We don't talk enough about playtesting and iteration. So before you guys get to experience a game like Jennie, we playtest it and fail many times before we get there. So that's the kind of the process that we go through.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your questions. Thanks to you guys for being on the panel, and have a great E3.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Katie, Sarah, and Jennie.